In the southern city of Huizhou, an electronics factory is hiring with a monthly salary between 4,500 and 6,000 yuan, enough to pay only for food and essentials. The advertisement that's put up says new employees are expected to work hard and endure hardship. This message might have resonated with Chinese of an older generation, many of whom worked long hours in poor conditions to give their children a brighter future. But many of those children now face similar slavery and are unwilling to endure it. This is Zhang, a 20-year-old working at a local tea shop. The job at the tea shop pays just 4,000 yuan a month, but he enjoys chatting with the customers. Now, before you dismiss Zhang as just another Gen Z brat, consider that he has been working for 7 years, including time spent in a factory. He sends half of his wages back home to support his parents and sees no hope of buying a house or making enough money to get married and have children. He says hard work is important, but eating bitterness will make you unhappy. Across China, young people are discouraged and have been raised on stories of economic dynamism and social mobility. The Chinese economy has more than doubled in size between 1978 and 2018. Back then, city kids could study hard, get into a good university, and expect a white-collar job upon graduation. Some lucky students from small towns might do the same and make their way into the middle class. Though the less educated young people had fewer options, they could still travel to cities where the wages in factories were high enough to start a family. China was more open. Decades before Jinping came to power in 2012, party leaders Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao were hardly liberals, but they left some space for civil society, intellectuals, and the media to operate. Private enterprise flourished, and firms were encouraged to go out into the world and learn from the West. For young people today, though the outlook is much gloomier, the economy is struggling and they are feeling the worst of it.
工作的环境太倦了。
现在待业嘛，可能每做一天，这种顾虑都会又增加一分哈。
Unemployment among urban Chinese, aged 16 to 24, has been running at over 20% for months, about double the age group's pre-pandemic level. The official job numbers for this group are so stubbornly awful that China recently stopped publishing them altogether. Higher education is no longer a reliable ladder to a solid career. In 2021, over 70% of those unemployed youngsters were graduates. Along with scarce jobs, they face sky-high property prices. Their modest dreams of finding work, buying a house, and supporting a family seem increasingly out of reach. All this has led to the emergence of a new nihilistic vocabulary, featuring phrases such as tangping and bailan. This shows how the mood of young Chinese is growing even darker as the time passes. Some 360 million Chinese are between the ages of 16 and 35. Their gloom has profound implications for the future of China, its economy, and the party's ambitions. But rather than soothe the young, the government tends to scold them. Editorials and state media encourage them to embrace struggle and sacrifice their youth to the cause of national rejuvenation, furthermore repressing the youth. It is not as if young Chinese do not work hard. From an early age, they face enormous pressure to do well in school and ace China's notoriously tough university entrance exam, known as the Gaokao. Nearly 13 million youngsters took it this year, and yet there is a growing feeling among young people that no matter how hard they study or work, they will not be rewarded with a better quality of life. They speak of Neijuan, or involution, an academic word used to describe a situation in which extra input no longer yields more output. As the number of university graduates has increased, the number of jobs for which they are suited has not risen at anywhere near the same rate. It has even worsened because a large number of youngsters who decided to extend their studies during the pandemic are also now joining the job market, creating an even bigger surplus of graduates. According to a recent study of Xiaopin, 39% of job seekers in first-tier cities had at least 2 surplus years of education, over and above those required by the jobs they sought. Outside these big cities, the proportion was more like 70%. Tales emerge on social media of educated young people taking low-skilled jobs, such as sorting trash. For instance, one cigarette maker hired students with master's degrees for its production line. Many young people now seek poorly paid, but more stable government jobs that were once scorned by ambitious types. The number of people appearing for such exams went up to 2.6 million last year from 1.4 million a decade earlier, and only 1 in every 70 got selected. The Hukou system, a household registry, forces most who migrate to cities to live a low-quality life without access to local benefits like medical insurance. Between 1998 and 2021, homes in Chinese cities became 4 times less affordable, judged by the ratio of average house prices to median disposable incomes. In Beijing, this ratio rose to 25 in 2021, more than twice that of London. While regretting their inability to afford a nice home, the young also bear the growing burden of caring for their parents and grandparents due to the demographic distortions wrought by nearly 40 years of the one-child policy. Meanwhile, the relatively open cultural atmosphere of the Hu and Jiang eras has vanished under Mr. Jinping. Censorship has become far more heavy-handed. Chatter on the internet has turned into a dreary chorus of nationalist talking points. On Chinese television, depictions of effeminate men and women's cleavage have been banned. Even video games have been deemed too much fun, and authorities have ordered the removal of gore and tried to limit kids' playing hours. Earlier this year, Lai Haoshi, a Beijing-based comic, used an army slogan in a joke about how his dogs eagerly chased a squirrel. That was deemed insulting to the armed forces. Media companies were told not to hire the comic, and police said he was under investigation for causing a bad influence on society. Mr. Jinping has also tightened control over China's education system. Since 2021, students at primary and secondary schools have been assigned inflated texts devoted to Mr. Jinping's personal ideology. Several literal scholars have been dismissed. Officials want Chinese history to be taught in a way that glorifies the party. If not, it is deemed historical nihilism, and in 2021, a government hotline was set up for citizens to report such nihilism if they see it online. In a survey by Xiaopin, 61% of women graduates said they were asked about their marriage and childbearing status when applying for jobs, compared with just 32% of men. Women were also less likely to secure a job before graduation. A discouraging message about their future comes straight from the top. Dejected and demoralized, young people still find places to vent online. Baidu Tiba is a Reddit-like forum where discussions take place in various subgroups organized by subject. The results show an improvement in the collective mood after the government lifted its zero-COVID restrictions in December. But in general, China's young people have been growing more pessimistic in recent years. Take the differences across generations. Those born in the 1980s are the least disheartened. Growing up in hardship, they experienced the benefits of reform and opening and took advantage of the opportunities presented by China's economic boom. And those born in the 1990s, by contrast, are the most disheartened. They grew up during the boom years in the heyday of globalization, but are entering the workforce just as the economy stagnates. Young people are pulling back in other ways too. Why would I get married? Why would I go on a date? Are the two most popular ones. High house prices are a particular concern for young men because home ownership is often seen as a prerequisite for marriage. Dowries, which more traditional families demand for marrying their daughters, have been increasing. Some even ask for sums that would bankrupt prospective grooms and their families. Such economic burdens, along with changing societal views, have resulted in a decline in marriages. Around 6.8 million couples got hitched last year, which is just about half the number of a decade ago. None of this bodes well for China's dismal fertility rate. Besides home prices, analysts point to the rocketing cost of child rearing. UA Population Research calculated the average cost of raising a first child to the age of 18 is about 485,000 yuan in 2019. This is nearly 7 times China's GDP per person, one of the highest rates in the world. In 2016, the government swapped the one-child policy for a 2 children per couple limit. In 2021, it switched to a 3-children policy, and it's now more a goal than a cap. China's leaders are not blind to these sufferings, but they are not sympathetic either. Mr. Jinping portrays the hardships suffered by previous generations of youngsters as a model to emulate and not a nightmare to leave behind. Still, he has tried to respond to some of the underlying causes of young people's despair. Regulators have urged e-commerce firms like Meituan, a food delivery company, to improve pay and conditions for gig workers, softening the algorithms that punish them for late deliveries. Along the way, authorities made examples of some of China's wealthiest business celebrities by arresting them But the government's moods have mostly backfired. The public humiliation of tech entrepreneurs was a punch in the stomach for ambitious youngsters inspired by their example. And the regulatory crackdowns on their companies, as well as on property developers, have hobbled some of the most reliable employers of China's university-educated youth. The biggest threat facing China's leaders is not a sudden social upheaval, but a slow and steady erosion of social cohesion. This is characterized by a loss of vitality, stamina, and hope among the young people, who are the future of the country. China is relying on increases in human capital to offset its decrease in humans. However, the lying flat phenomenon and high graduate unemployment suggest that these measures are not enough. The tightening grip of the authorities over civil society, popular culture, and entrepreneurs also would seem to discourage the risk-taking that marked earlier generations. Some of China's best-educated youngsters will no doubt emigrate. Applications for the civil service are expected to jump again this year, and if China wants to become the more innovative economy that Jinping envisions, it cannot afford to lose too many of its brightest minds to its least efficient companies.